So we're continuing to look at how to manage a tech-savvy organization and following through the history of management by looking at the contingency view of management, where there's no one right way to manage. And so we were looking at how technology is impacting management, and we left off with the last area of management information systems being business intelligence. I'm just going to fast forward through those slides that we had in our previous video, and let's talk about what is business intelligence and analytics. So there's really four areas of data analytics: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. The first two, the two D's, are business intelligence. And the two P's are what we commonly think of when we think of AI, machine learning. So let's start with descriptive statistics. Descriptive is what is happening to my business. So when you think about descriptive analytics, we're talking about creating dashboards. Dashboards are becoming more and more popular, particularly in the fields of accounting, so that we can monitor what's happening to revenue, to expenses. Here you can see an economic dashboard from the province of Alberta, so you can monitor what's happening in terms of the economy. So remember, descriptive statistics and descriptive analytics is what is happening to the business, and is often in the terms of some kind of visualization to help us monitor that. And so we can see, here's a graph that we've looked at previously, data visualization. So building those charts and graphs to help us understand what is happening. And then you might see web analytics tools. So again, some data visualization. Here we can look at the number of people who visit a website. This is a screenshot of my YouTube channel here. And I can track then how many views, when do they view, and I pull information, for example, in terms of where are they viewing from, and collect information about my clientele. So descriptive analytics is looking at what is happening with the business, and often in the form of some kind of data visualization. The second type of data analytics, the second part of business intelligence, is diagnostic. So why is this happening to the business? We want to drill down to the root cause. And so when we look at got too fast. When we look at diagnostic analytics, we're going to do some type of data mining. We're looking for patterns. We're looking for relationships with our information. So we might have a number of different data sources that we need to pull together. We might be scraping information off the web. We might be pulling information from documents. We might have surveys that we're collecting of information. And so we want to look at the relationship between all this information that we have collected. So in diagnostic analytics, one thing you might do is cluster analysis. So can we identify specific cohorts or groups of people? So maybe this is our graph and we're looking at who spends the most money. How many times do people purchase when they do buy from us? So how much they spend each time, how many times they purchase. And so can we identify these clusters or groups, and what is it about them? So who is this group in yellow here that buys a lot from us each time and keeps coming back and buying again and again? What is it about this group? This might be our ideal client that we then need to flesh out who they are, how do we appeal to them, how do we grow that particular customer base. We'll also look at things like decision trees. So what we're doing is we're trying to classify information. In this particular decision tree, it's looking at, can you classify the animal? But we can use our classification models to help us in terms of what groups of individuals buy which particular product, which products best match different needs, and looking at particular groups and their preferences. So for example, I could build a decision tree to look at my students and how they like to learn. Are there particular groups of students who prefer homework? Are there other ones who prefer watching current events, news, and videos? And so we're classifying different individuals, different customers, different employees based on preferences to better understand why our employees are happy or sad or engaged or not, why our customers are buying particular products, And so we're trying to drill down to better understand what's happening with each group of individuals. We can do this with natural language processing. So natural language processing is a type of data mining that uses text mining. So you think about, we can actually scrape information that you put on Twitter or the reviews you put on Google or Yelp to better understand how our customers feel or how non-customers feel about our organization. So we're mining the text. It's just one form of data mining. And we're looking at language. So it's natural language processing. We can look at sentiment. How do people feel based on the tone of their language? So here you can see a sentiment score related to COVID-19 and lockdown. And so how did people feel? Were the comments more positive or negative on social media when the country decided to close businesses, restrict movement during COVID? And so you can see the ones on the right. In fact, you can see Canada right here. When there were more restrictions enacted, the comments on social media were more positive. And if we look at countries over here, when the restrictions were put in place, the comments on social media were more negative. Now, maybe it's about when those restrictions happened. So if restrictions happened before people really felt the concern or saw the impact of COVID, those responses might be more negative, right? Why are they doing this? It's no big deal. If the country waited a while to enact restrictions, and so people were like, it's about damn time that the country did something about it, then you see more positive. So we're looking at, remember with our, go back to our diagnostic analytics, why is it happening? Why are people on social media more happy or sad? And here we're tying it to what happened with COVID lockdowns. So here's another example of sentiment analysis here. You can see as we look at this over time. So how were people's comments on social media? Were they more positive or negative related to COVID-19? And this looks at the change over time. If it's moving towards blue, then it is more positive sentiment. And if it's moving towards red, then it's more negative sentiment. So you can see how things kind of get progressively worse, and then you can start to see where people start to feel better about what's happening. So we can look at that change over time, and this one's looking by country as well. So we can use natural language processing to analyze language, and one of the methods for analyzing language is to look at sentiment. How do people feel based on the words they're using? So we look at tone, we look at the type of words to see if we can determine whether people are more optimistic or pessimistic. So we've looked at descriptive analytics and diagnostic analytics. That makes up business intelligence. And so then let's move into our predictive and prescriptive analytics, which we're seeing more and more of. So let's start with predictive analytics. So the basic level of predictive analytics, we're looking at what is likely to happen. We want to predict the future. And so here we're looking at forecasting models. And if you're interested in doing more forecasting models, we do have a course in operations management where we do forecasting. And then of all of this, all four types of data analytics, we have a course in business intelligence and analytics where we do all of these four different types of analytics, including doing some marketing analytics. So can we forecast sales? Can we forecast how much demand there's going to be? What customers are going to want? What is happening with our brand against the competition? So we're looking at what is likely to happen in the future. And so there are a number of services that help with that forecasting. Many of the cloud-based data management systems, Amazon Web Service, Google Cloud, have some built-in forecasting systems to help you if you're keeping your data in the cloud to help turn that into forecasting models. Can you predict what's going to happen? Other things we can look at besides forecasting and marketing analytics is we can use that natural language processing to look at and forecast. We can look at sentiment. We can forecast in terms of what people are saying about us. And we can use that to help us look at, for example, who is going to be a good employee. So if we're doing hiring and recruiting and we're using artificial intelligence, machine learning tools to help us screen applicants, then we can use natural language processing to text mine people's resumes, and we can build a model to help us forecast who is going to be a successful employee. Now, Amazon did this. They had created one of these models, and the challenge with it is that the model was developed and trained, so we have to build the model based on something. So we already have to have some classification, right? So Amazon takes the resumes of their great workers and has the machine develop an algorithm to say, okay, these are the classifications of individuals who are successful employees. So now we look at the new resumes with our natural language processing. We're looking for patterns and things that are similar to those successful employees to predict that these new people will also be successful. Well, the challenge is that Amazon used information about current successful employees, and the database they used to build that algorithm was primarily men. And so what happened, and they were finding when the system was forecasting who was going to be a good future employee, it wasn't recruiting any women. It wasn't picking any women. It was only picking men, because it was looking at resumes, and anytime anyone mentioned like a women's college or a women's sport, well, the training data that looked at those successful current employees, they didn't have anything about women's sports, women's college. They weren't women. And so the forecasting model was a bit problematic and meant that they weren't shortlisting any women for positions. And so Amazon had to remove that recruiting tool. So when we're looking at forecasting predictive analytics, we need to make sure that we have well-trained data, and we need to look at what are we using to create that model to do that forecasting. We can take our predictive analytics and we can look at it on a location-based analytics. So we can look at it on a map using geographical information systems, or GIS. And what it does is it allows us to take the data, look at it laid out on a map like here. So then we can start to look at what is likely to happen if we change the floor plan, if we change the spaces. So for example, what you see here is the Red Deer College campus and room utilization during the day. And so we can see the darker blue, the higher the utilized rooms. Well, so this is going to help us develop a model that says, okay, well, what if we change the technology, the layout, the functionality of the spaces? Would we increase the utilization of our spaces? Can we get them darker blue? And so we look at predictive analytics, what is likely to happen. We can also take that into the next level of analytics and start creating simulations to see if we can get more utilization of these spaces. So we can use text with natural language processing. We can use geography or location-based analytics to help us predict what's likely to happen. Don't know why this thing keeps just jumping all over the place. The last area of business intelligence and analytics is prescriptive. So we need to know, what do we need to do? So what should the organization do to get a particular outcome? So in prescriptive analytics, as we just said a moment ago, we can have things like simulations. And so Kraft Heinz, for example, wanted to solve its supply chain problems. So it created a simulation of its factory. And so in the virtual environment, they could change different aspects of their operations and see what's happening. And so we're starting to see the emergence of virtual reality, augmented reality. The time of this video, Apple is announcing their augmented or AR glasses, right? So this is so that now you don't have to buy a computer monitor. You can have 3 giant monitors that are virtually in front of you. You can have your FaceTime meetings at the same time. So you see the real world, but you're adding to it additional things that aren't really there. That's augmented. And virtual reality is where it's entirely fabricated. But we can use the virtual reality or the augmented reality to run through scenarios, create simulations to see if we change this, if we do this, then what will happen. And so we're moving from that predictive, what is likely to happen, to what should I do to get something specific to happen. And so Kraft was testing that out. What if they change their product lines? What if they change some of the way they handle the materials and processes in the warehouse in order to increase output? Other prescriptive analytics include things like machine learning. And so we're seeing more and more machine learning. And when I was talking just a moment ago about where Amazon is testing out or is creating a model to screen for the best applicants, this is machine learning. So what it is that we have a data set of information where we've already classified them. So we've already classified good employees, bad employees, and we enter it into the machine to kind of find the patterns that we may not detect. And then it can then be used, we hand it a new resume, and it's going to then say, okay, well, based on the classification system, the model I've developed, this particular resume is for a candidate who will be successful. This one isn't. You can also use the machine learning to do things like identify what particular products would be good. So in Amazon, right, when you go onto their website, it's recommending things to you. So what we've done is train the algorithm. People who buy this item tend to buy that kind of item, and we start to match and find patterns in people's spending behavior. And then when you go to the website and start looking at one thing, it's going to start recommending something else because it's learning from those patterns that have been that it's been trained on. So there is a difference between supervised learning, where there's a training set that it builds the algorithm and learns from. So those are classified. And unsupervised learning, where it doesn't have a training set that already has the classification. So for example, if we're trying to train a system to identify cats, you feed it a bunch of pictures, and you've already told it in the training sample, this is a picture of a cat, this is the picture of not a cat. And so it starts to learn based on pattern recognition. Okay, it's going to look for certain shapes like ears or whiskers. That's going to indicate that it's a cat. So that's supervised learning, where it has a training set. Unsupervised learning has no training set. Instead, it's learning from itself based on the consequences. So it might classify something and then it gets rejected, or the feedback it gets is it's learning from that as opposed to a clean training data. So often the example with unsupervised learning is, okay, you're going to make fake money. You're going to print your own money. All right, so we're not going to load into the system a bunch of fake money and true money and have it learn that way. Instead, it's going to create something, and then if it gets punished because it's seen as fake, it learns from that, and it starts to learn over time. Remember, it's just pattern recognition. Okay, the ones that got rejected, the ones that got flagged, the ones that aren't, seem to have these things in common. So it starts to learn what the correct thing is based on which of the money makes it through and which of the money gets rejected. Now, when you're looking at prescriptive analytics, right, we talked about simulations and machine learning. We can take that machine learning, typically the supervised machine learning, and we can add to it robotics. And so this video here looks at fruit and identifies whether or not the fruit is ready to be picked or not. And so the robot moves around, scans, and is looking for whether or not the fruit is ready to be picked. And it might be attached to robots that then do the picking. So we can attach it to robotics to help then, once we have figured out, should we pick the fruit, then we can actually pick the fruit as well. Other types of supervised learning are a type called neural networks, and we're seeing more and more of this when it comes to finance. And the idea here is that when we're looking at the optimal portfolio for your investment, or if we're trying to predict stock prices, there's so many variables that might be impacting what happens to a stock. You have the economic variables. Is the economy growing, shrinking? What's happening to interest rates, unemployment? You have variables related to the competition. What are they doing and what kind of changes have they made in strategy and PR and what's out in the news? The same time, you have changes within the organization in terms of operations and reports that come out in terms of their financials. And so there's so many variables that it's really hard to just create a forecasting model because you don't really know which variables are significant or important. So the idea with a neural network is that the machines will figure that out because they're going to assume there's some kind of hidden layer, these variables that can't be observed. So we'll input a bunch of information and have that output where the stock price went up and down, and it's going to figure out which of those variables or relationship between variables or lag time between variables actually are important in terms of predicting the prices or what's the optimal combination of investments to do well. So we see this in finance. It's a supervised learning, a type of supervised learning where it's looking at, there's a lot of complicated information and it's identifying which variables and those hidden layers. And the idea why it's called neural networks is that's how the brain works, right? There's so many different neurons firing in your brain. It's really hard for us to kind of figure out exactly what triggers each thought, each motion. And so if we can replicate that with the computer, then we don't need to figure it out. We can let the computer run like a human brain would operate. When it comes to prescriptive analytics, what we're seeing now is generative AI. And the idea with generative AI is that it's using both supervised learning. So we're training the data, or we're training the algorithm using data. And then it also learns from itself. So it has the unsupervised or reinforced learning at the same time. So when you look at things like ChatGPT, that is generative AI. So what happened is they basically scrape the internet pre-2021, I think it is, and have it look at all the information that's out there. So it's learning from that. And then you have sample sets of data where people say, okay, this is okay, this is correct, this is wrong, this is inappropriate, and do that flagging. And so it has that training data where it learns there, and then it also has the reinforced learning aspect, which is as people issue more prompts, it's learning from that. You know, when you say, okay, regenerate a new response, right? That's okay. Well, it asks you, was this good? Was this bad? It's learning from that to get more and better responses. So generative AI is a combination of both that supervised and unsupervised learning. So we could ask it all kinds of questions. What's the best winter sport? How do you ski? I have here in our previous discussion, we were talking about global strategies. And so I could ask ChatGPT what the 4 global strategies are. And it's going to specify that information. And then I can say, okay, which of these 4 global strategies does Tim Hortons use? So with ChatGPT, as opposed to like Bing AI, each of your prompts are tied to each other. So it's actually learning from that previous piece. So I accepted this feedback it gave me about the 4 global strategies. Okay, that seems legit. The wording is different than what we use, but you can see global, transnational, some of the terminology we've been using. And so then when I ask it which of the 4 global strategies does Tim Hortons use, it's learning that it should be tied to one of those 4 options it's given. As opposed to if I just ask it out of the blue, what global strategy does Tim Hortons use? It doesn't have that previous prompt of information to learn from, so I might get quite a range of information. So it's reinforcing, it's learning what it should be and limiting that scope based on each additional prompt that I give it. Now, we can use generative AI to give us information, to help us brainstorm. Here, what I have here is that I'm training our ChatGPT about how Midjourney works. So Midjourney is also a generative AI, but the difference is Midjourney generates images, whereas ChatGPT generates text. So I can train ChatGPT on how Midjourney works by providing a bunch of prompts that tell, here's the definition that I took from Midjourney. Here's how prompts work in Midjourney. Here are some examples of prompts. And so all of this is training ChatGPT in terms of how to write a prompt in Midjourney. So then I can ask it, which is the last piece I did here, somewhere down here, is okay, now write me a prompt for Midjourney where it's a book cover art and it's going to be a book about business intelligence and analytics. And then I define that's descriptive analytics, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. It's about machine learning for managers. And so I'm giving it this prompt. Well, I've already provided it additional learning by telling it how Midjourney works and how prompts work. And so it then gave me a prompt. And so I can then take that prompt, for example, and go into Midjourney. And Midjourney, you provide a text prompt, and then it will create an image. So before I was working on an image for a textbook, I was just playing around here. So show me a cartoon cow who's very angry with smoke coming out of its head. So that's the prompt. It has been trained on taking images off the internet and images that had words attached. And so here's a picture of a cow and here's the word cow. And so it's learned kind of what a cow looks like based on pattern recognition. Not that it knows the word cow or anything about cows, but it's matching the word and the pattern. And so I then have it draw me a cow. And so the way Midjourney works is then I can pick from these 4. I can have it give me a different version, that's the V's, of one of the pictures. So I kind of like the first one with his crazy eyes. So generate me more of that. I clicked V1. If I find one I like, then I can click the use. That's give me an upgraded, better quality image that I can then save. And so you can see here I generated some cows and I ended up with a picture of a cow. For when I created that ChatGPT prompt, so ChatGPT created the Midjourney prompt in terms of what to create as an image, I took that just as ChatGPT gave it to me, and you can see that it's creating some images that are kind of bright colors, technology looking. And so you can use the 2 of them, the 2 generative AIs, to create images. So if you think about for your business, you can have it create advertisements, logos. You can have ChatGPT create for you your social media. What do you want in terms of promotions? You can have it create letters, and people have been using it to create resumes and things like that. So when we're looking at, let's go back here. Come on. To that generative AI, remember we're looking at what do I need to do? So it's saying, what do I need to create in terms of the image to get these points across? What do I need to create in terms of text and words in order to get these ideas across? Generative AI can go even further. We have deep fakes where we are creating videos and pictures of people that aren't actually even in there. So again, pattern recognition, developing those images, de-aging. So in movies, we can take someone who's in their 80s and make them look like they're in their 40s. And so again, this is machine learning here, and combining that supervised and unsupervised learning. We can use, or it's being used right now to create sound, right? So there's music that's out there. Right now, at the time of this video, there's a Drake music that's out that he never made. So with only a couple seconds of sampling of someone's voice, it can actually generate music or spoken word that sounds like you. And so you can use ChatGPT to write the text, and you can use the generative AI for sound that has you saying it even though you never did, or have somebody completely different like Drake say it even though they never did. So we're creating and generating new images, new sound, new content using our machine learning. And so with generative AI, we can give prompts, right? So in this picture, I told it mice covered in pancakes, and it made pancakes shaped like mice. So better prompts in all of those will give you better and better results. So you can use these for your business. And so start thinking about, how could you use all of these sources of AI, machine learning, and the 4 types of data analytics to help improve your business? What we hear from industry is that this is the way that business is going. So if you're in human resources, we're automating things like benefits. We're using natural language processing and facial recognition in the hiring process. We're using machine learning to predict whether or not you will perform well, to monitor bias, to determine whether or not people will stay as workers. Accounting is really pushing in their accreditation, that knowledge of machine learning and coding. And so the CPA has set that as a skill set that future accountants need to have. In finance, as we talked about, that neural networks, the machine learning to make credit decisions, to identify fraud protection or prevention, customer service chatbots, algorithmic trading. This is all using machine learning to help make recommendations as to what individuals should do. So, right, so we're looking at our we are looking at our prescriptive analytics on those components. Big data is the future of marketing. So web scraping, those marketing analytics, using AI for content curation, like the Midjourney, like using ChatGPT to create your social media posts. This is where the future is going. And if you're an entrepreneur or a small business, you're doing all these things, and including web design, making decisions in terms of your operations and managing your supply chain. And so the future of business really is AI and machine learning. And so it's important, and we'll end the course here with our discussion about emerging tech, because that is where, no matter what field of business you go into, you're going to be quite involved with in the future.